Today we're going to be talking about how you can throw a perfect spiral every time. Now, tip number one to throwing a perfect spiral every time is make sure the last finger to touch the ball is your index finger, which is your spiral finger. And we're going to explain how you can do that. So when you release the ball, you want to be obviously flicking your wrist. That wrist flick is how a lot of quarterbacks will get a consistent spiral, but that wrist flick needs to make that finger be the last one to touch the ball, and that spin off of it is how it ultimately spins. So there are two things that you could do if maybe you struggle with that, or maybe you don't even know if you're doing it or not. So first one is move the index finger a little bit higher. I think a lot of quarterbacks have this like very low grip, especially guys that have small hands. Move that index finger up just a touch higher. Not where it's like uncomfortably high, but definitely high. Like I would probably say the midpoint between the white stripe and the tip of the ball. Now, to make sure that it's the last finger to touch the ball, if that seems like it's not working, apply more pressure with just the index. You never want to over grip the ball and grip it super tight and try to spin this thing. It's just going to end up throwing almost a curveball. Guys, apply more pressure with just the index. So when you release the ball, that will ensure that it's the last one to touch the football to help you get a more consistent spin every time. Now also, fellas, if you're a quarterback watching this and you guys would like a 2-month-long daily workout schedule on the field and in the gym that you could do to improve your game, check out that very first link in the description below for our ultimate quarterback training package. What you'll get access to, again, is 8 weeks of daily workouts, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. We break it down into daily splits. We give you the exact sets and reps to follow, and we give you a video example of quarterback-specific on-field drills for your throwing mechanics, your footwork, and in the gym workouts specifically for quarterbacks. So guys, check out that very first link in the description below if you're interested. Let's get back to this video. Now, tip number 2, you guys, is to actually improve your wrist flick position. I think a lot of people, when they're trying to throw the ball, they'll try to flick their wrist, but it's almost like their hand is going the wrong way. Whenever you release the ball, you guys, that perfect wrist flick position is either your palm facing down or your palm facing out. And a lot of quarterbacks, when they throw, they try to flick their wrist, but their palm ends facing up. And that's why a lot of guys will have that kind of like sideways, almost curved spin to the ball. So how do I actually get my palm to finish down rather than just being like, oh, just think about your palm being down? Because a lot of quarterbacks, when they just think about, okay, I want my palm to be down, they still go here and then they change it. And that has to do with your shoulders and your hips being off. Whenever we throw as quarterbacks, you guys, you never want to open up your shoulders and your hips at the exact same time, because that's going to cause something called an over-rotation. And an over-rotation is usually why a quarterback will finish with their palm facing up. Let me explain. So when you go to throw, if you open up this, as quarterbacks, we know that our power comes from our hips, our core, and our legs, and we're trying to drive, right? But we don't want to drive all at one time. We want to separate my upper body from my lower body, and I want to drive here before my shoulders to create a whipping effect, but so my shoulders can stay disciplined at my release. I'm not swinging way open, widening my arm outside my frame. So if you take a step to the target and your shoulders open up and your weight's trying to drive through and you have your hips and your shoulders rotating like this, your body gets pulled off of something called the midline, essentially your spine. And when your body pulls off the midline, your hand goes in the opposite direction. Your throwing hand, because it's holding a ball, it's got some weight to it, so it goes in the opposite direction and you're coming across, and that's why the palm finishes up. When in theory, when we throw, we want to keep my shoulders parallel to the target, and I just want to be able to snap and flick. So you could think about the snap and flick, but if your body's not allowing you to just snap and flick, then you're not going to do it, at least at first. So what we want to do, guys, is when we throw, you want to take a step to the target, but you want your shoulders to rotate back, you want to keep your weight on the back leg, and then you want your hips to be the sole force of rotation, and you keep your shoulders parallel to the target so your release could stay inside your frame, and we could just snap, extend, and finish on the ball rather than ripping across with my arm, causing my palm to face up. Now, something that prevents a lot of quarterbacks from having that clean wrist flick and also having that index finger be the last finger to touch the ball is they over grip this thing with their palm on the ball. So if I'm holding this ball and you can't see a gap of like space between my palm and the football, I'm over gripping it. It usually makes it hard for us to snap, extend, and flick my wrist. So what you want to do is you want to have a gap, just a slight gap. You should be able to see light through your hand if you hold this ball up in the air, but a gap between your palm and the ball. So how you could find that gap is try to fit it, like get a finger in that gap of space. So you're going to put your finger between your palm and the ball and then just remove it, and that's the magic grip that we ultimately want to have that will allow you to get a clean spin on this thing. Now, tip number 4 is going to be keeping your elbow up when you throw to prevent something called a wrist break, okay? So a lot of quarterback coaches will say like, oh, hey, your wrist's breaking when you throw, so just make sure you keep your wrist still. But if you have a freaking low elbow and a low arm slot where you're throwing like this, you're like, so what, your wrist is straight? You're still not gonna be able to spin the ball. You have to be able to get your elbow up. I would say elbow should be even with your shoulder when you release the ball. Now, a lot of old school quarterback coaches say you gotta be here. A lot of new school quarterback coaches say you gotta be here. I'm kind of like a whatever you please type of guy. I don't really think it matters. I just think your elbow can't be low to your rib cage, because when you try to throw, that's what causes that wrist break position. Now, it's much easier said than done. Hey, get your elbow up, right? Like, and if you're a quarterback and you've thought about that while you're throwing, it feels insanely awkward. You feel very, very slow with your motion. So an easy way to help with that is strengthening your rotator cuff. So you could do exercises like where you're holding like 2 heavy, like weighted plates, and some called flex tees, where you hold your arm at a 90 degree and you're gonna feel a burn in your shoulder. Maybe you walk with it. Maybe you do some flex tee rotations with that. So you rotate down with the weight, you rotate here. Maybe you rotate your hands inward. Anything to strengthen your rotator cuff. Maybe you have a J-band routine. You baseball guys know what I'm talking about. But anything to strengthen your rotator cuff will help you get that elbow up naturally in your motion, because when you throw naturally, your elbow does not want to be down here. But strengthening that rotator cuff will help you throw a cleaner spiral.